You'd think after an ending like that, the MCU would take some time to breathe before announcing 7,000 new projects, but you can't stop the money train now, so over the course of this year's San Diego Comic-Con and D23, Kevin and company announced about 7,000 new projects. Some sound really awesome and intriguing, and others are a show about Loki, oh god. Even though nobody asked me, let's go down the list and talk about all the things in the MCU over the next few years, and maybe touch a little bit on what won't be there either. Whitewash Widow! It's kinda cool that she's finally getting her own movie after so long. I can't tell if everyone hates Scarlett Johansson or not still, but it has a Marvel logo on it, so it'll make $1 billion regardless. This time our favorite tree will be up against all kinds of super spy espionage stuff in post-Civil War, pre-Infinity War Marvel world. So many wars! I think setting it in this time span is a little strange and limiting because it doesn't give her the opportunity to hang out with Hawkeye really, and the whole movie will really feel weird knowing the character's ultimate fate. I think I would have preferred to put her trilogy somewhere in the post-Thanos kills everyone era because that's 5 years in a really dreary, crazy world where society would be insane. Though there's always room to put the sequels in there if they decide to give her a posthumous movie trilogy. Captain Falcon and Big Boss! So this is one of the shows I'm looking forward to the most because I like that they're finally giving us a little more to work with from Baron Zemo. I like him a lot as a villain, but I was disappointed with how little they did with him, so it's going to be cool to see him more developed across a longer format and finally wear his cheesy-ass costume we've all been waiting for. If you're writing a comment going, "Speak for yourself, his costume is stupid," you're uninvited to my birthday party, bitch. Otherwise, I hope both of these nerds take turns throwing the shield at stuff and maybe using it to crack nuts and prop up short table legs. Maybe they'll surprise us with that Old Man Steve cameo and he'll show up to talk about all the awkward conversations he had for the past 30 years, explaining to Peggy why he can't look their little blonde niece in the eye. Oh look, they're already halfway there! Also, I guess everyone just forgot Bucky's a war criminal, so that's nice, good for him. What do I say that's funny about Shang-Chi's name that's not, like, racist? I was really hoping this guy would turn up an Iron Fist, but I guess having Typhoid Mary, a Daredevil villain, seemed more prudent. I personally don't know much about the character outside the fact that he's basically Bruce Lee, his dad is Fu Manchu, I'm not joking, look that up. He doesn't really have powers, but then one day he can do that thing Multiple Man does, and a lot of annoying people are going to come out of the woodwork saying they're closeted Shang-Chi superfans for clout in the months leading up to the movie, despite only really vaguely remembering him in that one Ultimate Spider-Man arc. Being a character typically shown to not have powers, I hope they really build up the fantasy elements in this one to justify it not being a TV show or something smaller in scope. Judging by the fact that they'll finally have the real Mandarin show up and tie up that stupid loose end from 1 billion years ago, I think we can assume that's the case. Hell, at this point, we've seen enough weird shit in these movies, I think they can get away with Shang-Chi fist-fighting Fin Fang Foom. Why not? Eternals! I know about as much about these characters as anyone else, and I'm not going to pretend I have a lot to say about them in spite of that. I hope it's cool. I don't mind Marvel taking obscure cosmic characters and giving them the spotlight, because they have a pretty good track record with that. All I know is Jack Kirby definitely designed better costumes than this. Yeesh. ColecoVision! For some reason, all MCU stans on Twitter arbitrarily decided they hate these characters, or they hate everyone except these characters. But I personally don't mind them as much. I think it would be cool if they took some inspiration from Tom King's Vision comic where the goofy red android is trying to be a suburban dad and live a normal life. Although they still gotta figure out how to undo this thing, so that might take up most of the running time. Stranger Things in the Mouth of Madman. I find myself in an extreme minority opinion here, but I think my least favorite MCU film is Doctor Strange. The visuals are stunning, but I find the characters, the story, the villain, and a lot of the world building to be pretty lackluster. I especially couldn't get over the awkward comedy bits that were clearly added in reshoots because the test audiences felt the movie was too serious. Because they feel out of place and hold the film back from having more emotional weight. That being said, Doctor Strange was great in Ragnarok and Infinity War when he got to interact with better written characters and fight a villain that didn't suck. So maybe there's some hope for this one yet if they just boost everything else. Kick-ass, trippy visuals alone a good movie do not make. They're marketing this whole thing with like a horror aspect to it, and I've gone on record before saying I'm very interested in the idea of a horror-themed superhero movie. Fantastic Four dabbled in that a little bit before getting muddled into just a bunch of generic, "we can do it team" action scenes. Venom dropped the ball on that super hard when the messy PG-13 cut was put together at the last second to open the door for a Spider-Man crossover. And New Mutants has been banished to the Shadow Realm. I just think the MCU won't take the risk they're promising with that. Maybe 1 or 2 scenes will show some scary or dark imagery while the rest of it is just a bunch of this.
Try me, Beyonce.
I'd love to be proven wrong though, especially since the director has a background in horror movies. Also, Wanda will be there too for some reason. She's the only other character who waves her hands around in a weird way that makes things explode. Loki should have stayed dead. Also, apparently he was under mind control when he committed that teensy little genocidal terrorist attack, so it's not really his fault, you guys. He's still a precious cinnamon bun who deserves the whole world and also to be railed by Thor. I fucking hate Twitter. Speaking of stans, everyone seems to hate Hawkeye because he's not deaf and or training Kate Bishop and or isn't a depressed hipster millennial dad that drinks coffee and has bandages on his face. Apparently, a lot of people seem to forget that this character did in fact exist before the Matt Fraction comic, but I guess that doesn't matter now, and we'll never see him wear this costume unless it's a flashback that lasts for 30 seconds, or a scene where he tries it on in the mirror and then says, "Ew, this sucks," because that joke never gets old. Ever. Hopefully they'll have Clint write a heartfelt apology to the families of those Yakuza and cartel members he killed, because he's racist. What if I were to purchase fast food and disguise it as my own? This show sounds really cool conceptually. I like the idea of doing a weird Elseworld version of each movie in the MCU thus far, and it's even more impressive that they have a lot of the movie cast doing the voices. Over 7,000% of the show's budget will go to having Robert Downey Jr. saying about 4 lines of dialogue, but it'll be worth it! Thor, Sex and the City. I guess it's kind of interesting that they'll be giving Jane Foster something to do after all this time. I know Natalie Portman wasn't exactly the biggest fan of the movies she was in already, but when they say, you get to be the title character of a Marvel movie and we'll roll up to your house with a dump truck full of money, it's hard to turn down. I just worry because the Jason Aaron run on Thor was based around Jane Foster being a pretty different character, and I don't know how they'll adapt certain story elements of it to fit the MCU version. Her having cancer might be too depressing, so they'll just say she has light back problems that make it hard to carry too many groceries all at once, which will be cured by the use of Mjolnir. However the hell they managed to get that back again.
Make it look like an accident, Blade!
If you ever needed any further evidence that the Marvel Netflix shows were not really canon and none of the higher-ups cared about them at all, just look at Cottonmouth taking on the role of Blade. Don't get me wrong, this is fucking wonderful casting and he's gonna kick ass. But it's a little disheartening to see that they just really can't even attempt to keep up the illusion anymore. It's all connected. It's nice though because Mahershala got jacked pretty hard in Luke Cage. It was a great idea to set up this awesome villain and then unceremoniously kill him off halfway through the season. Really subverted my expectations there. What a waste of talent. I know some folks are pissed that it's not Wesley Snipes again, but A, he's getting a little bit too old for the role now, and pulling off such a physically demanding character is harder than it was 20 years ago. The man's almost 60 now. B, it would very much complicate the MCU canon to use him, because that would imply his trilogy is canon, and we have to explain why no one's talked about how interwoven vampires are into society before. And C, he's notoriously hard to work with. Just look at all that stuff that went on behind the scenes of Trinity. Like how he refused to open his eyes for one shot, so they just had to fix it in post, if you call that fixing it. Give Mahershala Ali a chance. I think he can really bring something special to this. Oh, it's gonna be PG-13, shit. Jesus, they just will not let up on the Disney Plus shows, will they? They really want you to pay for another streaming service. As if the 7 or 8 you have already aren't starting to really add up and break the bank. Remember the good old days when everything was just kind of split up evenly between the two, and maybe there was a third option if you're a hipster contrarian like David? Now you gotta pay $10 to $20 each just so you can watch like 2 things on each service. I'm sick of this shit. Can we just not? This is worse than paying for cable channels. We've regressed. Whatever, you don't care. Miss Marvel! It's gonna be pretty cool to see a high school-oriented superhero with a secret identity in the MCU, since we're lacking one of those these days. Hey! Oh my god, this video is getting too tiresome to edit. Scott, will you take over for me while I take a nap? She-Hulk. Okay, here's my pitch for how to make this show super radical awesome. Make sure to keep the courtroom stuff that Jennifer Walters is known for because she's a lawyer. There's a bit of a void left behind now that our other courtroom drama superhero show is gone but not forgotten. Next, maybe dabble in some of that fourth wall breaking comedy that She-Hulk used to be known for, but never go too overboard with it that it becomes excessive. Just little subtle nods and cracks about it here and there to make her funny, but in a unique way from every other funny Marvel protagonist in these shows and movies. Have Marky Mark Buffalo Sauce show up every now and then to develop their cousin dynamic. You don't have to have him Hulk out, just be there as a supporting character and influence her origin story. Heck, you can set it in that weird 5-year gap and have him discover how to become Professor Hulk in the show. Now, the part I can't emphasize enough. Get Tim Roth to be the villain of the show. Really make him menacing and take a little longer to develop his character. Emil Blonsky had super strength that made him a match for the Hulk in his human form, so you can still do action scenes with him without breaking the budget, turning him into Abomination every time. Then set that up to be the big thing in the conclusion of the first season, and really hype up him transforming into a big monster again. Maybe even make him bigger and scarier than before. And if you still got time after all that, you can even tie up that loose end with Samuel Stearns. I mean, what's that guy been up to for the past 10 years? They will do none of this. Hell, Jen will probably be a scientist or something and get beamed with gamma rays on accident and never interact with Banner. They'll make like 2 jokes about her becoming a lawyer, but never actually do it. The villain will be, Mercy, I guess, because they haven't used her in anything yet, and you don't have to spend a lot of money on it. Her costume is just a purple robe. Moon Knight is probably gonna make me really sad. After seeing how Deadpool and Punisher have been treated lately, I can tell you the show will probably be decent, but fail to capture the character's core essence. This is one of the darkest comics in Marvel, and I can already tell they're going to water it down and make Looney Mooney more marketable to a big audience. Just like how they leaned more into comedy elements for Deadpool and only barely touched on the heavier stuff. Or how they made Punisher a reluctant Jason Bourne Wolverine hybrid that has to convince himself to punish constantly. That's a lot more likable than a deranged serial killer on a lifelong mission to eradicate a huge chunk of the human population. I did a whole video about this, go watch it. So anyway, Moon Knight kicks people so hard they vomit, he carves a moon logo into people's foreheads, he crashed a helicopter and a Taskmaster because he was too lazy to fight him hand to hand, and he once kept a human face as a souvenir after violently killing his nemesis by tackling him off a rooftop and stabbing him repeatedly. Then he would sometimes put the face on and look in the mirror while hearing the voices in his head tell him to sacrifice more souls to a frightening elder god that looks like a bird skeleton. Then his girlfriend walked in on that and it led to one awkward dinner that night. You see what I'm getting at here? You think they're gonna put a character like that on something with Disney in the name? No, they'll just make him Batman in white because that's easier to market. I bet they'll only keep Spectre's dissociative identity disorder as a traumatic thing from his past that he's already gotten over by the time the show starts, because mental illness isn't sexy or something. A few years ago, I would have been ecstatic for this announcement. But now I just can't help but feel worried they're going to misrepresent this character and it'll have a negative effect on his comics. Moon Knight comics are great because the character is so obscure and niche that the writers can do whatever abstract or dark things they want and have a lot of creative freedom. The more mainstream the character gets, the less they'll be able to do with him, as they won't want to scare away the big influx of new readers picking up the books after the show. So we won't get risky stuff like the spiritual and haunting detective-based 2014 run, or the mind-bending character study acid trip of the 2016 comic, or the ultra-violent political drama of the 2006 run. They'll make the comics more safe and accessible, just like the show will be. This is how we get things like the Scotty Young Deadpool book. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. If they were to do it right, it would be darker and more artsy. Something kind of like what they did with Legion, but I wouldn't hold my breath. Sure, I sound like a pessimist, but I'll reiterate my earlier point. I would love to be proven wrong. Now on to the future of Spider-Man, if there is one. I kinda am not sure if I want to speculate on this one.
And that's why you should watch my video speculating it. Sliver boy, baby!
Hey, Scott, save that for the ending.
Oh shit, fuck. Okay, come on boys, let's head out.
I feel like we'll get a definitive answer in a few days and make this video feel pretty instantly dated, but I think there's a few ways this can shake out. 1. Disney and Sony come to some deal and then continue with business as usual, following through with their plan to have Spider-Man be the heart of the MCU going forward, and get older as the series progresses, becoming a more traditional Spider-Man like the one in the comics currently. A little while ago they were talking about how Tom had like 9 more movies in his contract before everything fell through. 2. Sony just runs off with him and makes a conclusion to Tom Spidey's trilogy so we can find out what the hell they were doing with that post-credits scene. I walked out of the theater that day joking with my friend that it felt like the kind of post-credits scene you get when the series is about to be cancelled or rebooted. So, something like the Sinister Six setup, or the Deathstroke appearance, or Baraka Pool. This would be kind of weird because then this trilogy would wrap up with Spider-Morty over here, no longer acknowledging any of the other MCU stuff of which his character is written entirely around. Like Happy Hogan, and Avengers, and Iron Man, and fucking where he even got his suit. All can't really be touched on anymore. It's not impossible to pull off, it would just be a lot harder. Hopefully the Spider-Man Home Slice trilogy gets a conclusion either way, because it sucks that every Spider-Man thing keeps getting cancelled early. Option 3. Sony just says fuck it and makes a new Spider-Man from scratch for the 40th time, and he's in his mid-20s and dating a white redhead MJ, and has been Spider-Man for a few years now, and it takes place in the same universe as Venom. It would look something like the PS4 game in terms of characterization. 4. Somehow they haggle their way into doing option 1 again, but then Venom is also there, and that's now canon to the MCU. 5. Reboot with Miles, I guess. I'm nervous about this one for a few reasons. The main one being that Spider-Verse is already a perfect origin movie for him, and they'll never top it. Then there's also how they'll have to dodge around a lot of story elements for Miles being used for Spider-Tom, and how it'll feel kinda samey now. There's also this obnoxious phenomenon in fan communities where they hate whatever came before and automatically love and praise the current thing just because it's the current thing. So we get a lot of people shouting that Peter Parker is now a terrible and outdated character, and Miles should be the new main Spider-Man and everything, including the comics that those people wouldn't read either way, because no one cares about comics. You think I'm exaggerating, but look how much love Toby got until he stopped being current, and then how much bile both him and Andrew got as soon as Tom stepped in. As soon as they cast a new Spider-Man, all bets are off, and whatever came before is suddenly trash, no matter how much people loved it at one point. Fandoms are fickle and stupid like this, and I, for one, am not looking forward to more discourse about which Spider-Man is the best one. It's so tired. But hopefully if this is the route they go for, it's justified by Miles' live-action debut being pretty damn good, because that character deserves some love too. I just hate that people can't express their appreciation for something without also having to trash something else in the same breath. Yeah, okay, Mr. Wise Guy in the comments, writing about 15 examples of me doing that same thing, you're so clever. I have made peace with the fact that all of these are a possibility. I've learned to not get as attached to any one interpretation of these characters anymore, and I'm willing to accept that they're going to be making big-budget movies with Spidey forever, and it's unreasonable to stamp your foot down and say no one can ever portray your heroes ever again because someone already nailed it. There will be another Tony Stark in a movie someday, and there will be a new Wolverine sooner than you might think. I just hope that both are good in their own right. If Tom Spoderman gets another shot at finishing up his story in one way or another, that's great. But if we have to see someone else take on the old web-slinger, that's fine too. Whatever happens, I just know I still love Spider-Man. Thanks for indulging a few of my side rambles here and there, but there's a lot I had to say, and doing this video was the best way to say all of it at once. As much cynicism and sarcasm as I throw at the MCU, I still look forward to all of this stuff, and I want my more sour predictions to be woefully incorrect, because I just want the best for these stories and characters. I think the future is shaky right now for the franchise because we're in a transitional period between the old and new. They're still trying to discern what's going to work and what won't moving forward. But I think there's a chance they'll figure it out and wring every last possible cent out of the concept before general audiences become bored by the 15 movies they need to see every summer to understand the plot of the next 15 movies coming out the following year. That ending was meant to be a lot more sentimental, but I couldn't think of anything nice to say. Whoops. Anyway, don't be as grouchy as me and try to keep a positive outlook. Some of this stuff will be pretty damn cool. And also Loki.
So if you liked my editing or my cameo in this video, baby, you should watch my videos. I made a video on film and it was pretty fucking good, but no one watched it. So yeah, watch it. It's good. And also watch my. You're not gonna watch it. You're fucking GodzillaMendoza fans. You're not gonna watch my video about film. You're gonna watch. Okay, fine. Here's a Spider-Man video as well. Please check out my channel. It's dying. make one video on Evan Falcon and suddenly you're a monster. I don't know where I was gonna go with this.
Just a quick reminder before you go that I post my videos a day early on Patreon and give exclusive behind-the-scenes content and patron-exclusive videos. Please consider becoming a patron, it really helps me out. If you want a more short-term way to support the channel, you can check out my merch in the links in the description. We have t-shirts, phone cases, posters, mugs, pillows, baby onesies, and so much more. See you next time!